morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Turn of the Tassel Show. My name is Stephen Ampersand. I am your host. And as always, we're here to help you and the people you love get to and through college, university, or the trade schools earlier on time with minimum to no debt. Today, we're going to be talking about the student loan payment pause. Student loan payment pause. And we're going to look at an article out of Forbs that says the student loan payment pause, Senator says, extending student loan relief is unfair to most Americans. Unfair. So we're going to talk about that. Is it unfair? Is the student loan payment pause unfair to most Americans? Before we jump in, and I'm not going to read it to you because this is one of those articles that actually has the ability to read it for you. So I'm going to play the reading of this article, and we'll talk about it as we go through. But before we jump into that, I'm just going to preface everything by saying, one of the realities of this life that I think it is helpful for us to help young people, but ultimately help one another to accept is that life isn't fair. Expecting fairness in life is, well, it's a recipe for missed expectations. There are double standards. There are variances in how some people are treated versus how other people are treated. And that's just the reality of humanity. It's what it is. So just right off rip, for me, when I hear about anyone speaking in terms of unfair, I automatically put an asterisk next to whatever comes after that, because true enough, life isn't fair. Now, I believe in justice. I don't believe in fairness personally. My personal belief is that justice should be done. Justice should be served. And again, the beauty of this thing is that no one has to agree with me or my position on that. I think we all have the autonomy to view the world the way we view the world, and let the outcomes speak for themselves. So that's the ultimate deciding factor. You can believe all the things you want to believe, but at the end of the day, your results, the outcome of your life, and the results of your life ultimately dictate whether or not your worldview is a successful one or not. So there's my preface, and I was being very general in saying what I said, sweepingly general in that statement, because we all come from different places and different backgrounds. But at the end of the day, if you enter a dialogue with me and we're talking about fairness, already there's an asterisk there in my mind, because life isn't fair. But I do think things should be just. It's from that context of justice that I think we need to talk about this. So without further ado, we're going to go to camera number 2. And let's take a listen.
Student loan payment pause. Senator says extending student loan relief is unfair to most Americans. By Zach Friedman. Extending the student loan payment pause is unfair for most Americans who didn't borrow student loans, says this U.S. Senator. Here's what you need to know, and what it means for your student loans.
All right, so let's start the show right there. So this senator is saying that it is unfair for most Americans who did not borrow student loans. In other words, it's not fair that they have to continue to pay their obligations, et cetera, but folks don't have to, who have borrowed loans, who made a decision to borrow loans. It's not fair that they get a reprieve from all this. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that when you look at the gas prices that we have and the inflation that we're seeing right now, any relief that can be given to any and everyone should be on the table right now. I really believe that, because these external factors are impacting us all. And we know at upwards of $1.73 trillion of student loan debt, 60% of which belongs to women. it's putting significant pressure on households, particularly single parent households, most of which are led by women. And we don't have to get into the debate about whether or not that should be the case or what have you. The fact of the matter is that is the case, and so a lot of pressure is on these families, single parent families with their moms in particular, as a result of the inflation that's happened. It's been hyperinflation. Things have gone up so quickly. We have the supply chain issues where folks aren't getting the goods and services into the store. So even if they have the resources to go buy it, it's not available. And of course, then that drives prices up. The gas pump is just ridiculous. So, if we're talking about fairness, no, it's not fair. But sometimes to provide justice, you have to do things that aren't fair, but that are right. It's right to do. So, jump back in.
Senator Joni Ernst, REA, says that if President Joe Biden extends the student loan payment pause, it would be both unfair and short-sighted. The student loan payment pause, which has been ongoing since March 2020, is scheduled to end on May 1, 2022. For the past 2 years, student loan borrowers haven't been required to make any federal student loan payments and student loan interest rates have been set to 0%. Now, Biden is considering extending the student loan payment pause for a 4th time during his presidency and the 6th time overall. Biden could pause student loans forever. This is a short-sighted and unfair deal for the vast majority of Americans who didn't take on debt and will ultimately be stuck with the bill. Let's make sure students have a clear picture of these costs before they take out a loan.
All right, let me
Student Act and
I'm gonna pause right there. Stop the show for a second. Come back. So, do you guys remember the housing bubble of 2007 and 8? Excuse me. Do you remember that bubble? And do you remember how the banks, some of the biggest, oldest, largest banks in the world were literally about to go out of business, and what that was going to do to the economy? Those banks got bailed out. And it was taxpayer dollars that were used to bail those banks out. And then they went right back to business as usual after the bailout. Nothing changed. And they said, well, they were too big to fail. They're too big to fail. So we can't let them fail. Right? Translation. You and I are not too big to fail. They're perfectly willing in many respects to let you and I fail. That is unfair. But if they had let those banks fail, we would have had a cataclysmic market crash that wouldn't have just leveled the United States, would have leveled the world, because the US dollar is still the world's global currency. So literally, they couldn't do it. They had to do what was right. The right thing was to make sure that the world economy didn't go belly up and thus create such massive scarcity that you'd have people warring and fighting in the streets, for survival. We would have gone all the way back to the Stone Age if that had happened. So it was the just thing to do. Now, those banks and how they behaved afterwards was unjust. And the taxpayer still footed that bill, right? So one could argue that pausing, and dare I say it, even forgiving the student loans that have been borrowed to this point, many of which were borrowed unknowingly, or at least without the true understanding of the sweeping and long-lasting longitudinal impact of borrowing those loans, were not adequately presented to students. Many students, literally, they had paper slid to them in the beginning, said, sign this, and we'll take care of everything else. And they signed it, and they didn't know that they were mortgaging themselves for the next 120 months, 10 years. They didn't know. So if we went, first of all, you have to put a moratorium on it. You have to stop that student loan program. Stop it. you can't let people continue to borrow and then forgive all the past stuff. You got to stop lending it, and then you forgive all the rest. And so, in other words, you got to fix the whole system. You can't, you got to undo that. You got to unravel it. But they won't do that because it's way too much money to the colleges, universities that have special interests and lobbyists and different ones on the hill, making sure that this cash cow keeps milking, right? But even if you forgave it for those who owe it, and that fell back on the taxpayers, well, didn't the banking crisis fall back on students? Strike that. Didn't the banking crisis and bailing out those big banks fall back on the taxpayer? And then they got to go back to business as usual. Whereas if you actually forgave the loans of student loan borrowers, now those people have more disposable income and thus have the ability to make purchases and do things they couldn't do with those student loans. And that could improve the economy. Now, the challenge is where we are right now in the U.S. economy and with our current policy with the Biden administration, we have seen record inflation and we've seen, scarcity. We've watched Economics 101 play out here, supply and demand. The supply chain has been disrupted. And so there are fewer goods and things available. And so when you infuse a bunch of money into people's pockets because they're no longer obligated to pay these student loans or what have you, more people in theory will have more disposable income, but there's no more goods available. So that too could drive up inflation. Do you see the mess that we're in? Let's keep going.
Of forcing others to pay it, Ernst tweeted. Student loan cancellation and the student loan payment pause are confusing. Here's what to know. Student loan relief, an alternative to the student loan payment pause. Ernst believes that extending the student loan payment pause, which collectively has saved student loan borrowers $5 billion a month, is not the best public policy. Instead, she and Senator Chuck Grassley, RN, proposed new legislation known as the Student Transparency for Understanding Decisions in Education Net Terms, Student Act. The Student Act would provide student loan borrowers with an estimate of the total amount of interest they would pay over the life of their student loans.
All right, stop the show.
Provide.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and that proposal is dumb. It's dumb because that has, it's apples and oranges. That has nothing to do with the people that are indebted right now that are trying to figure out how to, get out from under this gorilla that's on their back. Now, we've done several broadcasts. We had, the rich, the cool rich aunt on who paid off over $110,000 of student loans, and she talked about how to do it. So it's not like it's not possible to do it. It's absolutely possible to pay it off if you're determined and you're willing to cut your lifestyle and you go to work and you work a lot and you give all of what you earn to paying that off. It can be done. And it can be done, really relatively quickly. I think she got it all done within 4 years, which is incredible. Okay. But the point is, like, to say, that, okay, this pause is not fair and offer as your solution, let's put legislation together that explains to people exactly how much they're going to owe if they borrow the loans to help them make better decisions, right? That is for new borrowers. What are they talking about? What are they talking about? Like, your response, your answer to solve the issue of the paused loan payments is to draft legislation to educate future borrowers. So, now don't get me wrong. I'd like to see that happen so that there aren't future borrowers. Right? Clap that up. Meaning, if they could be more transparent and show you that, okay, when this is all said and done, you're going to owe us $110,000 for your criminal justice degree. And you're going to come out making $48,000 a year before taxes. And, with that tax bracket, you're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 24%, 23, 24%, right? And then you add in your local, state, and other sales taxes and everything else. Really, about half of your paycheck goes to taxes before it's all said and done. In some places, as much as 55%. So cut that $48,000 in half, and what do you have? $24,000. So you're going to get a criminal justice degree that's going to net you $24,000 a year to live on, and you've got to pay back $110,000. That's a bad deal. It's a bad deal. So, nonsense. Let's go a little bit more.
More transparency to student loans. Implement a standard 10-year student loan repayment plan, and disclose the total interest amount during or prior to borrowing a student loan. While the Student Act won't provide student loan relief, the proposed legislation will empower student loan borrowers to make better financial decisions before borrowing a student loan. Okay. It's hard to believe that there is an existing law that requires lenders to disclose the total interest owed based on a student loan repayment plan.
I agree.
With more transparency, student loan borrowers could make better decisions about which college or university to attend, how much student loan debt to borrow, and how long it could take to pay off student loans.
Okay, that's good. Let me stop it right there, and we're going to come out of this. You can go listen to the rest. I'll put a link to it. But yeah, so right. There is value to doing consumer information reporting so that people know up front how much it's going to cost. And they speak to here what I talk about often here at the Turn Tassel Show, right? We talk often about how you can win with higher education, how you can win. It's by getting a plan together and choosing the right school, the right price point that you can actually afford to pay out of pocket with minimum debt, if any at all. Why? So that you're not caught up in this financial death trap of student loans that you spend the rest of your adult working life trying to get out of, and deferring and forbearing and forbearing and deferring. And before you know it, you got six-figure student loan debt and your kids are getting ready to go to college. Don't do that. Contact us at 484-574-1866. Email us at turningtassel@gmail.com and simply say, I need a plan. We will work with you. We'll give you a free consultation. We'll work with you to figure it out so you or someone you love can get to and through college earlier on time with minimum to no debt. I'm Stephen Ampersand, and this is the Turn Tassel Show.